From the raw streets of Brooklyn to the glittering heights of Hollywood. From a foster care kid with nothing but a dream to a comedic force who redefined an entire generation. The man who gave us the street-smart detective who took down criminals with a smile. The genius who transformed into an entire family on screen. The voice that made a wisecracking animated character a global phenomenon. Eddie Murphy didn't just become a star. He became a cultural earthquake. But what the cameras never captured, what the red carpets never revealed, what the standing ovations never showed, was the price he paid for all of it. Behind the billion-dollar box office numbers, behind the sold-out arenas, behind that infectious laugh that made the world forget their problems, was a man fighting battles nobody knew about. This is the story they never told you. The pain behind the punchlines, the struggle behind the success. And by the time this video ends, you'll see Eddie Murphy in a way you never have before. So stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. April 3rd, 1961, Brooklyn, New York. Roosevelt, New York, to be precise. Eddie Regan Murphy enters a world that isn't ready for him, but more importantly, a world he isn't ready for. His father, Charles Murphy, was a transit police officer and an amateur comedian. Finally, someone who understood humor, someone who could teach young Eddie the craft, but life had other plans. When Eddie was just 3 years old, his father was murdered, stabbed to death by a girlfriend. Just like that, the man who gave him life, who gave him laughter, was gone. And Eddie was too young to even process what that meant. His mother, Lillian, tried to hold things together. She worked multiple jobs, struggling to raise Eddie and his older brother Charlie. But the weight was too much. When Eddie was 9, she became ill. The state placed Eddie and Charlie in foster care. Foster care. Let that sink in. The man who would one day make millions laugh spent his childhood in a system designed for forgotten children, passed between homes, never truly belonging anywhere. But here's what most people don't know. It was during this time that Eddie discovered his gift. Not as an escape, not as a coping mechanism, but as survival. If he could make people laugh, maybe they'd like him. Maybe they'd keep him. Maybe he'd finally belong somewhere. And so, in the living rooms of strangers, a young Eddie Murphy began performing impressions. Cartoon characters, TV personalities, anyone who could get a smile. He was building an armor made of laughter, an armor he'd wear for the rest of his life. Jump forward to 1980. Eddie is 19 years old. Most teenagers are figuring out college. Eddie Murphy just became the youngest cast member of Saturday Night Live. Let me repeat that. 19 years old on national television every single week. And he didn't just join SNL, he saved it. The show was dying, ratings were tanking, the original cast was gone, NBC was ready to cancel it. Then Eddie Murphy walked onto that stage and created Mr. Robinson, Gumby, Buckwheat, Velvet Jones, character after character that became instant classics. By 1982, at 21 years old, he released his first comedy album, Eddie Murphy Comedian. It went gold. Then came Delirious in 1983, the red leather suit, the raw, unfiltered comedy that pushed every boundary. It became the highest grossing stand-up film of all time. But here's where the pain begins to seep through the cracks. While Eddie was conquering stand-up, he made his film debut in 48 Hers. Opposite Nick Nolte, the movie was a smash hit. Then came Trading Places in 1983, another massive success. Then Beverly Hills Cop in 1984, which became the highest grossing film of that year, earning over $300 million worldwide. Eddie Murphy, at 23 years old, was the biggest star in Hollywood, the highest paid actor in the industry. He could write his own checks, choose any project. The world was literally his. But success at that speed, at that magnitude, at that age, it comes with a price. And Eddie was about to pay it in full. Here's what nobody tells you about fame. It's lonely. Incredibly, suffocatingly lonely. Eddie Murphy went from foster care to penthouse suites, from wondering where his next meal would come from to having anything he wanted. But here's the cruel irony. He still didn't belong. In interviews from the mid-80 seconds, you can see it if you look closely. The smile is there, the charisma is there. But behind his eyes, there's something else. A exhaustion, a weight. He was working non-stop. Movie after movie, The Golden Child, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Coming to America, Harlem Nights. He wasn't just acting, he was writing, producing, directing, building an empire. But empires are built on foundations, and Eddie's foundation was cracked. That little boy in foster care, desperately making people laugh to be loved, was still there. Still performing, still proving his worth. And the industry? They loved him as long as he was profitable, as long as he was Eddie Murphy, the brand, the product, the cash machine. But the person, the man dealing with childhood trauma, with imposter syndrome, with the pressure of being the one everyone depended on, nobody asked about him. His personal life became tabloid fodder. Every relationship scrutinized, every mistake amplified, every human moment turned into a headline. The armor of laughter was starting to crack, and the world was watching, waiting for him to fall. Then came the 90 seconds, and the 90 seconds were brutal to Eddie Murphy. After a string of box office disappointments, the critics turned on him. Vampire in Brooklyn, Metro, Holy Man, films that couldn't capture the magic. Suddenly, the golden boy was being written off. Eddie Murphy is done, they said. He's lost it, they wrote. But the professional setbacks were nothing compared to the personal ones. In 1993, Eddie married Nicole Mitchell. They had 5 children together. From the outside, it looked like he finally found stability, a family, a home, the thing he never had as a child. But in 2005, after 12 years of marriage, they separated. The divorce was finalized in 2006, and Eddie was ordered to pay one of the largest divorce settlements in Hollywood history. His family, the one thing he built to fill that childhood void, was fractured. And then came 1997, the incident that would haunt him for years. Eddie was arrested in West Hollywood after picking up a transgender sex worker. The media had a field day. Late-night hosts made jokes. The public ridicule was relentless. But here's what got lost in all the headlines and punchlines. This was a man in pain, a man struggling with something deep and private, a man who spent his entire life making others happy while drowning inside. Eddie retreated. The man who once owned Hollywood, who sold out arenas, who couldn't walk down a street without being mobbed, disappeared. He stopped doing stand-up. He became selective with films. He built walls around himself even higher than before. The little boy in foster care who learned to hide behind laughter was now a grown man hiding behind silence. But here's the thing about Eddie Murphy. He's a survivor. He always has been. In 2006, something shifted. Eddie took a role in Dreamgirls as James Thunder Early, a soul singer battling his own demons. It wasn't a comedy. It wasn't the Eddie Murphy everyone expected. It was raw, vulnerable, real. And he was nominated for an Academy Award. That performance reminded Hollywood and the world of something they'd forgotten. Eddie Murphy wasn't just a comedian, he was an artist. A chameleon. A talent so immense that comedy was just one color in his palette. Then came Dolomite Is My Name in 2019. Eddie returned to the spotlight playing Rudy. Ray Moore, a real-life comedian who struggled for recognition and reinvented himself. The parallels to Eddie's own life were impossible to ignore. Critics called it his best performance in decades. They called it a comeback. But it wasn't a comeback, it was an evolution. This was Eddie Murphy finally comfortable in his own skin, no longer the boy desperately making people laugh for acceptance, but a man who earned his place and knew his worth. In December 2019, Eddie returned to Saturday Night Live to host for the first time in 35 years. He stepped onto that stage, the same stage where a 9-year-old kid once saved a dying show, and he reminded everyone why he's a legend. The audience gave him a standing ovation before he even told a joke. But here's the hard truth that we need to talk about. Eddie Murphy still carries that pain. In rare, unguarded interviews, you can hear it. When he talks about his childhood, there's a distance in his voice. When he discusses his past mistakes, there's a sadness. When he reflects on fame, there's a weariness. He's been open about stepping away from stand-up because the persona he created, the raw, edgy comedian, wasn't who he wanted to be anymore. That character was a shield, and after decades of holding up that shield, he was tired. Eddie has 10 children from multiple relationships. He's spoken about how fatherhood changed him, how he's determined to give his kids the stability he never had, but you can hear the guilt too, the awareness that his brokenness affected them, that the cycle of pain doesn't end just because you're rich and famous. Today, Eddie Murphy is in a good place. He's engaged to Paige Butcher. He's selective about projects. He's living life on his terms. But that little boy in foster care, the one who learned that love is conditional and laughter is currency, still lives inside him. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that pain is what made him great. Maybe the cracks are where the light gets in. Because Eddie Murphy taught us something profound. You can be broken and brilliant at the same time. You can make the world laugh while crying inside. You can be a legend and still be human. So what do we take away from Eddie Murphy's story? Success doesn't heal childhood wounds. Fame doesn't fill voids. Money doesn't buy peace. All the laughter in the world can't silence the pain inside. But resilience? That's real. Growth? That's real. The courage to keep going when everything in you wants to quit? That's real. Eddie Murphy didn't just survive. He transcended. He took every obstacle, every setback, every moment of darkness, and he used it. Not as an excuse, but as fuel. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes. He's stumbled. He's fallen. But he's still here, still creating, still evolving, still proving that your past doesn't define your future. The next time you watch Beverly Hills Cop or Coming to America, remember, you're not just watching a comedian. You're watching a man who turned pain into purpose, trauma into triumph, darkness into light. That's the real Eddie Murphy story. Not the red leather suit, not the box office records, not the headlines. It's the story of a boy who lost everything and became everything. And in the process, taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep laughing when you want to cry. That's resilience. That's strength. That's Eddie Murphy. If this story moved you, if it changed the way you see success and struggle, then hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their pain doesn't define them. Subscribe, because we're diving deep into the untold stories of legends who shaped our world. Drop a comment and tell me, what's your favorite Eddie Murphy moment? And remember, behind every icon is a human story. Behind every success is a struggle. And that's what makes them truly legendary. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.